Some stories should remain buried. This isn't one of them. The recording you're about to hear was delivered to my P.O. Box 3 months ago. No return address. No explanation. Just a weathered USB drive wrapped in a page torn from a journal dated October 17, 2016. I've spent weeks verifying the details, tracking down public records, and attempting to contact those involved. What I discovered left me questioning everything I thought I understood about the boundaries between our world and whatever exists beyond it. Tonight, I'm sharing a story that has never been told publicly before. The individuals involved have changed their names, moved away, and still refuse to discuss what happened that autumn in the small town of Millbrook. A place where the trees grow unusually tall, where the soil remains perpetually damp, and where locals avoid certain stretches of road after sunset without ever explaining why. The Richardson family thought they had found their dream home, a Victorian-era property on the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods, offered at a price that seemed too good to believe. And it was. The previous owners had vacated without warning, leaving behind furniture, clothing, even family photographs as if they had fled in the middle of the night. In my investigation, I obtained a police report documenting 6 separate calls from the Richardson residents over their 11-week stay. Each call more frantic than the last. Each dismissed by local authorities as unfounded. What happened within those walls defies conventional explanation. The evidence I've gathered suggests something ancient awakened beneath that property, something that had been dormant for generations until the Richardson family unknowingly disturbed it. I must warn you, this account contains moments that will challenge your perception of reality. I've interviewed doctors, historians, and paranormal experts, seeking rational explanations. None could provide answers that satisfied all the questions this case presents. The Richardson family's youngest daughter, Emma, kept an audio diary throughout their time in the house. Her final entry was recorded 12 hours before her disappearance. To this day, despite extensive searches, no trace of her has ever been found. This is her story. This is their story. A warning to those who might dismiss the boundaries our ancestors knew never to cross. What you're about to hear has been pieced together from Emma's recordings, interviews with surviving family members who spoke to me only under condition of anonymity, and local historical records that someone tried very deliberately to erase. The Richardson family's ordeal began on September 3, 2016, when they first turned the key in the lock of 47 Oakwood Lane. The locals called it the Blackwood House, though that name appeared on no official documents. The family would soon discover why the previous 13 owners had all left under similar circumstances suddenly, without explanation, often abandoning their possessions. As you listen, ask yourself this question: if you began to witness impossible things within your own home, how long would you stay before accepting that what you're experiencing defies logical explanation? How much evidence would you need before you believed? The events at Blackwood House force us to confront uncomfortable possibilities about the nature of reality itself, about what might exist in the spaces between what we can perceive and what we cannot. Let me take you back to that autumn in Millbrook, to the day the Richardson family first crossed the threshold of a house that had been waiting for them for a very, very long time. Millbrook wasn't always called Millbrook. The town has existed for nearly 3 centuries. But its original name, Crowley's Hollow, was deliberately changed in 1897 following what local newspapers delicately referred to as the incident at the mill. I've obtained fragments of the town records from that period. Most were destroyed in a courthouse fire in 1901 that many now believe was deliberately set. The surviving documents mention 17 residents who vanished over a 3-day period. No bodies were ever recovered. The property that would eventually become 47 Oakwood Lane was originally constructed in 1843 by Thaddeus Blackwood, a physician whose experimental treatments drew patients from across the state. His methods were considered unorthodox even for that era. Historical records describe him as possessing knowledge beyond conventional medicine. Emma Richardson was 11 years old, the youngest of 3 children in the Richardson family. Her father, James, was a software engineer who had recently begun working remotely. Her mother, Catherine, was a nurse at the local hospital. Their other children, Michael, 15, and Abigail, 17 were less enthusiastic about leaving their friends in the city. According to property records, the Richardson family purchased the house for just under a third of its appraised value. The listing agent had struggled to find buyers after the previous owners abandoned it overnight. Neighbors reported hearing screams from the property at approximately 3:17 a.m. on April 22, 2015. By morning, the family was gone. Their car remained in the garage. Their dinner dishes sat half-eaten on the table. The case remains open. Have you ever felt immediately uneasy about a place without knowing why? That sensation saved some members of this family, but not all. The Richardson family spent their first week in a flurry of unpacking and exploration. Catherine planted herbs in the garden. James converted the study into a home office. The children claimed their bedrooms, Abigail taking the largest room on the second floor, Michael choosing the room with the bay window overlooking the woods, and Emma settling into the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall. Their initial impressions of the house were overwhelmingly positive. James would later describe it as the first place that truly felt like home. The wooden floors gleamed under fresh polish. The antique fixtures had been meticulously maintained. The previous owners had even left behind several pieces of furniture that Catherine described as museum quality. The first unusual occurrence happened exactly 16 days after they moved in. Catherine had placed her grandmother's silver locket on her bedside table before showering. When she returned, it was on the floor in Emma's room across the hall. Emma denied moving it. Security footage from the home system showed no one entering either room during that time. 3 days later, James was working late in his study when he heard what he described as a conversation between multiple people, coming from the kitchen. When he investigated, he found the room empty, the voices silent. The home's security system recorded no movement. By the end of their first month, these incidents had increased in both frequency and peculiarity. Items would disappear from one room and appear in another. Cold spots would form in hallways despite the heating system functioning normally. Family members reported hearing footsteps when no one was moving through the house. Emma's imaginary friend appeared approximately 4 weeks after they moved in. Initially, Catherine and James were unconcerned, considering it a normal childhood response to the stress of relocation. That changed when Emma began sharing historical details about the house that a child her age couldn't possibly know. Catherine would later reveal that Emma told them about a hidden compartment in the fireplace. They thought she was making it up until James checked and found it. Inside was a small tin box containing medical instruments from the 1800s. How could she have known that? They hadn't even used the fireplace yet. The most alarming discovery came 6 weeks after the family moved in. James was attempting to install a new water heater when he noticed the basement dimensions didn't match the house plans. The east wall should have extended another 12 feet based on the overall footprint of the house. After careful examination, he determined the wall was not original to the home. It had been constructed more recently, and deliberately designed to look old. James would later confess that he thought maybe it was an old coal chute or storage area that had been sealed off during renovations. He convinced himself there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. He would come to deeply regret not leaving it alone. The sealed room James discovered contained nothing but a single wooden chair positioned in the center, facing the wall. No windows. No other furniture. Just a chair, facing the blank stone wall, as if waiting for someone to sit in it. What James found in the town records would change everything. What would you do if you discovered your home had 2 completely different historical records? Which truth would you believe? And what if both versions were hiding something even more disturbing? James Richardson visited the Millbrook Historical Society on October 12, 2016. His intention was simple: learn more about their home's past. The clerk directed him to the public records, which described 47 Oakwood Lane as being built in 1923 by a banker named Frederick Wells, who lived there until his death in 1961. Nothing unusual. Nothing noteworthy. But James noticed something odd about the records. The papers seemed newer than the other documents from that era. The typeface didn't match. Small inconsistencies that most wouldn't notice, but James had worked briefly in document authentication early in his career. He requested access to the newspaper archives, specifically looking for any mention of the address prior to 1923. The clerk's reaction was immediate and unmistakable alarm followed by forced casualness. She informed him those records were currently unavailable due to restoration work. This denial only fueled James's curiosity. He drove to the county seat 30 miles away, where older duplicate records might be stored. What he discovered there contradicted everything in the Millbrook archives. The county records showed the house was originally built in 1843, not 1923. It was constructed by Dr. Thaddeus Blackwood as both his residence and private medical facility. The description mentioned 7 bedrooms and a specialized treatment room in the basement. Their house only had 5 bedrooms. Something didn't add up. James dug deeper, finding references to Dr. Blackwood in medical journals of the era. His focus appeared to be on what was then called disorders of the mind. His methods were controversial. Multiple journals referenced experiments involving sleep deprivation, sensory manipulation, and something called threshold therapy. I've obtained an excerpt from an 1867 medical conference where a colleague described Dr. Blackwood's work. The doctor theorized that the human mind exists simultaneously in our world and another. His treatments aimed to thin the veil between these realms, allowing the afflicted to pass their disorders through to the other side. Those who underwent his complete protocol reported complete cessation of symptoms, though many described unusual dreams thereafter. By 1872, Dr. Blackwood had largely withdrawn from the medical community. County records show he continued to receive patients at his home, but no medical journals mention his work after this period. Then, in 1879, something happened. The property sat vacant for nearly a decade before being purchased and extensively renovated. James discovered that in March 1879, local authorities conducted a wellness check after neighbors reported not seeing Dr. Blackwood for several weeks. They found the house empty. No sign of struggle. No indication of where he had gone. Most disturbing was what one deputy described in his report upon entering the basement examination room. They observed the chair to be occupied by what appeared to be Dr. Blackwood himself. Upon closer inspection, the figure dissipated, as if made of smoke. No trace of the doctor was found on the premises. James photocopied everything he could find before returning home. He didn't share his discoveries with Catherine immediately, concerned about alarming her. Instead, he began comparing the house's current layout with the original plans he'd found. The discrepancies were substantial. Walls had been moved. Doorways sealed. The original 7 bedrooms had been reduced to 5. Most significantly, the basement had been divided, with approximately 1/3 of the original space now inaccessible behind the wall James had discovered. James began researching Dr. Blackwood's threshold therapy online, finding only obscure references in paranormal forums and occult history sites. One particular site contained a warning that sent chills through him. Blackwood's threshold sits unguarded. Those who inhabit his spaces risk becoming bridges between worlds. The chair is the anchor. The wall is the door. The sacrifice is the key. While James conducted his research, Catherine was experiencing health issues that began shortly after moving in. Chronic fatigue. Unexplained bruising. Nosebleeds that would start suddenly and stop just as abruptly. Medical tests revealed no cause. Catherine would later describe waking up exhausted, as if she hadn't slept at all. The doctor suggested stress, but it felt different to her, like something was literally draining her. And the dreams. She kept dreaming of sitting in a wooden chair, facing a stone wall, while someone stood behind her, touching the back of her neck. She could never turn around to see who it was. By late October, Catherine's symptoms had worsened. The children, too, had begun showing signs of stress. Abigail, once outgoing and confident, had become withdrawn. Michael developed insomnia. And Emma's relationship with her imaginary friend had grown increasingly troubling. From Emma's recordings, we discovered that her imaginary friend, whom she called Eliza, had shown her what she described as hidden pictures inside the walls. Emma claimed that Eliza said they were put there for protection, but they were fading. When they faded completely, the door would open. When Emma asked what door, Eliza simply pointed to the basement. The children's recordings were never meant to be heard. As October progressed, the phenomena in the house intensified. The family would wake to find furniture rearranged. Faucets would turn on by themselves. Electronic devices would malfunction, playing static or brief fragments of what sounded like human voices. Michael later revealed that he had set up his laptop to record while he slept because he kept waking up feeling like someone had been in his room. When he reviewed the footage, there were shadows moving across the wall. Not like when a car passes outside and the headlights make shadows. These moved against the light, as if they were solid somehow. Family members reported feeling watched constantly. James installed additional security cameras throughout the house, but they would mysteriously stop recording between 3 o'clock and 3:20 a.m. every night. No technical explanation could be found for this consistent failure. The most disturbing sensory experiences began in the third week of October. Family members described periodic shifts in the house's atmosphere, moments when sounds became muffled, as if underwater. The air would feel thick, difficult to breathe. And there was the smell. Abigail described it as smelling like old pennies and something sweet but rotten. Like fruit that's gone bad but mixed with metal. It would come suddenly and disappear just as fast. And always in the same spots at the bottom of the stairs, outside Emma's room, and in the kitchen pantry. By this point, James had shared his historical findings with Catherine. Their attempts to rationalize the experiences were becoming increasingly strained. Catherine suggested mold might explain some of the symptoms and hallucinations. James considered gas leaks or electrical issues causing equipment malfunctions. Multiple inspections revealed nothing. The house was structurally sound. No mold. No gas leaks. No electrical anomalies. James even brought in an audio engineer friend to analyze the strange sounds they'd been hearing. The technician, a professional with 20 years of experience, was baffled. What they captured in that house defied explanation. The spectral analysis showed sound frequencies beyond human hearing range embedded within normal household noises. When isolated and brought into audible range, they formed patterns consistent with human speech. But the speech was wrong somehow. Like the timing between words was stretched or compressed. On October 25th, James made contact with Eleanor Chambers, a local historian who had written extensively about Millbrook's early history. She initially refused to meet with him. After persistent requests, she agreed to coffee at a diner 20 miles outside of town. When James told Eleanor his address, she nearly walked out. She explained that the house had a history that had been deliberately obscured. The records found in Millbrook were falsified in the early 1900s as part of a broader effort to rebrand the town after certain incidents. What happened with Dr. Blackwood was just the beginning. Eleanor explained that Dr. Blackwood's experiments had continued in secret long after his public career ended. His final patient records, which Eleanor had accessed for her never-published book on the town's history, described successful crossings, patients whose mental illnesses had been transferred elsewhere. The prevailing theory, according to Eleanor, was that Blackwood's experiments thinned the boundary between our reality and another. The house sits at what local indigenous peoples call the weak point, a place where the separation between worlds naturally fluctuates. Blackwood didn't discover this by accident. He chose that location specifically. Eleanor warned James that the boundary weakens every autumn, particularly around the last week of October, when the original incident with Dr. Blackwood occurred. She urged the family to leave immediately, to not return until November had passed. James returned home determined to convince Catherine they should temporarily relocate. He found her removing wallpaper in the hallway, preparing to repaint. The conversation they would have next would render that plan irrelevant. Catherine discovered that the wallpaper had been applied over something else. As she peeled it away, she saw markings underneath. At first, she thought it was water damage or mold. Then she realized they were deliberate. Symbols, carved directly into the plaster. They covered the entire wall, hidden beneath layers of wallpaper and paint. James photographed the symbols before continuing to remove the wallpaper throughout the house. They discovered similar markings behind the wallpaper in every room, always oriented toward the center of the house. The symbols formed concentric patterns, like ripples moving outward from a central point. James sent the photographs to Eleanor, who responded with an urgent phone call telling them those were containment symbols. They were meant to hold something in, not keep something out. She urged them to leave the house immediately. Don't pack, don't delay, just get the family and go. What they found behind the wallpaper would confirm their worst fears. I need to warn you, what comes next is difficult to explain rationally. The evidence I've gathered challenges our understanding of reality itself. Many of you have suggested in your theories that entities don't cross certain boundaries. That theory fails to explain what happened next. James and Catherine gathered their children in the living room that evening, explaining they would be staying at a hotel while they addressed some issues with the house. Abigail and Michael were relieved. Emma was resistant. On October 26th, Emma recorded in her diary that she couldn't leave because Eliza said it was too late. The symbols were broken now. Eliza kept showing her the chair in the basement. She said someone needed to sit in it before they could go. As the family packed overnight bags, James made a comprehensive examination of the symbols they'd uncovered. He noticed they were most concentrated around the sealed room in the basement. Taking measurements, he confirmed his suspicion the symbols radiated outward from that precise location. What James couldn't have known was that by removing the wallpaper, they had disrupted patterns that had been carefully maintained for generations. Each subsequent owner had unknowingly preserved the symbols by applying new layers of wallpaper and paint without removing the old. I obtained a letter from Eleanor Chambers, written the day after her phone call with James. It was never sent, found among her possessions after her death 3 days later from an apparent stroke. The letter explained that the symbols in the Richardson house were part of a containment protocol established after Blackwood's disappearance. They had to be preserved at all costs. If damaged, they needed to be redrawn precisely according to the original pattern. The entity could not distinguish between our reality and its own without a guide. The chair served as that guide. No one was to sit in it. No one was to enter that room. By the time James received news of Eleanor's death, the family had already experienced the next phase of activity. Their daughter Emma's behavior had changed dramatically. She began speaking in complex medical terminology. She described historical events she couldn't possibly know about. Most disturbing, she started referring to herself in the third person. In a disturbing recording, Emma's voice became distorted as she declared that she now understood the pattern. The previous vessels were imperfect. Emma was more suitable. Younger minds bend without breaking. Emma would help complete the transfer. Catherine, a medical professional, recognized that her daughter's condition required intervention. When she attempted to take Emma to the hospital, the girl became violent, displaying strength impossible for her small frame. It took both parents to restrain her. Catherine later described how it wasn't Emma anymore. The way she looked at them, her eyes were wrong. She spoke about Thaddeus's work, about continuing his research. She called Catherine by another woman's name, Clara. Dr. Blackwood's wife was named Clara. The local community's reaction when asked about the property's history became another piece of the puzzle. When James sought help from neighbors, he was met with closed doors. The few who did speak with him denied any knowledge of unusual events at the house, despite clear discomfort when the address was mentioned. The family doctor who examined Emma suggested she was experiencing a psychological break triggered by the stress of moving. He prescribed mild sedatives and recommended psychiatric evaluation. What the doctor couldn't explain were the words Emma had carved into her own arm while briefly left alone in the examination room, words in what was later identified as Latin medical terminology from the 19th century. Desperate for evidence that might help medical professionals understand what was happening, Catherine set up recording devices throughout the house, audio recorders in each room, motion-activated cameras in hallways and common areas. The footage they captured defied rational explanation. An audio recording from Emma's room at 3:17 a.m. on October 29th captured a chilling exchange. Emma's voice asked if anyone was there, saying she couldn't see anything. Then a second voice, older, male, and distorted, responded that the boundary was thinnest there, and Emma had done well preparing the vessel. When Emma asked when she could come home, the voice replied that it would be soon. The chair awaited. The symbols were weakening. One final sitting would complete the work. Emma asked about the others, and the voice responded that they were unnecessary. The girl was sufficient. The most disturbing recording came from the kitchen later that same night. The camera captured Emma standing motionless for nearly 40 minutes, staring at nothing. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the video shows another figure standing behind her, tall, dressed in period clothing, with features that seem to shift and blur when viewed directly. The figure places a hand on Emma's shoulder. She doesn't react. No words are exchanged, but Emma nods as if responding to unheard instructions. The figure then walks toward the basement door, passing directly through it without opening it. 17 seconds later, Emma follows, opening the door normally and descending the stairs. The basement camera captured nothing after Emma entered. Just static. When the recording resumed 20 minutes later, Emma was back in her bed. The security system showed no indication of her return upstairs. The pattern in the recordings revealed something no one expected. With Emma's condition deteriorating and professional help proving ineffective, the Richardson family grew desperate. James contacted paranormal researchers, religious authorities, and academic experts in historical medicine. Most dismissed his accounts. A few expressed interest but were unable to visit immediately. Catherine took emergency family leave from the hospital and began her own investigation, applying her medical training to historical accounts of Dr. Blackwood's treatments. She discovered disturbing parallels between Emma's symptoms and those described in patients undergoing threshold therapy. The medical journals described a process of transference where the patient's affliction would be drawn out through prolonged sitting in a specially prepared chair. The subject would face a blank wall that supposedly represented the boundary between worlds. The doctor would stand behind them, placing his hands at the base of the skull, guiding the negative energies through the boundary. Most alarmingly, Catherine found references to children being particularly susceptible to serving as conduits, due to their mental plasticity. The journal suggested that younger subjects could facilitate not just the transfer of negative energies but potentially consciousness itself. James's research into property records revealed a pattern no one had previously connected. Over the 140 years since Dry Blackwood's disappearance, the house had changed ownership 23 times. In 17 of those cases, the circumstances involved a child between the ages of 8 and 12 experiencing behavioral changes, followed by the family's abrupt departure or, in 3 cases, the child's disappearance. The most recent case before the Richardsons involved the Collins family in 2015. Their 10-year-old son Andrew began speaking in archaic medical terminology and referring to experiments he wished to complete. The family fled in the middle of the night. Andrew was admitted to a psychiatric facility in another state, where he remains today. I obtained a brief clip from Andrew Collins's initial psychiatric evaluation. When asked his name, he responded in a distorted voice that, "The vessel is called Andrew Collins. I am Thaddeus." The work was interrupted. "I require a more suitable subject to complete the crossing." When the doctor asked who Thaddeus was, Andrew replied, "The pioneer. The bridge builder. The one who discovered the method of transference. This vessel is proving inadequate. The next will be chosen more carefully." While researching previous occupants, James discovered a hidden compartment in the attic containing a journal dating to 1912. It belonged to Howard Mitchell, who had lived in the house with his family for just 7 weeks. The journal entry from October 29, 1912, described how Margaret, Howard's daughter, continued to deteriorate. She was speaking with his voice now. The doctors called it hysteria, but Howard knew better. Something was trying to return through her. The symbols behind the wallpaper were their only protection. Howard had reinforced them where they'd faded. The basement remained sealed. Under no circumstances should anyone enter that room or sit in the chair. He feared they'd remained too long already. The journal ended abruptly. Historical records showed the Mitchell family left town the following day. Margaret Mitchell, age 9, was reported missing during their journey. She was never found. As October 30th arrived, the Richardson family reached a breaking point. Emma had stopped speaking entirely, communicating only through drawings of the sealed basement room and the chair within it. James and Catherine took turns monitoring her constantly, either willing to leave her alone even for moments. Theoretical explanations for their experiences ranged across disciplines. Catherine, with her medical background, proposed a form of shared psychosis triggered by environmental factors. James considered more esoteric possibilities that the house existed at an intersection of quantum realities, or that Dr. Blackwood had somehow discovered a method of consciousness transfer across time. Both theories failed to explain the consistent pattern across decades, the physical evidence they'd documented, or the specific knowledge Emma now possessed about historical events and medical procedures. Would you have left immediately or tried to understand what was happening? The Richardson family's decision would have irreversible consequences. I need to share something I haven't told anyone about this story yet. The final night in the Blackwood house began with a simple plan. The Richardson family would leave first thing in the morning. James had arranged for Emma to be admitted to a specialized psychiatric facility. Catherine had packed essential belongings. Michael and Abigail were staying with friends, having left the house that afternoon. At approximately 10:30 p.m. on October 30th, James checked the house's security system one last time before going to bed. All doors and windows were secured. Emma was sleeping peacefully under sedation, with Catherine monitoring her. The house was quiet except for the rain that had begun falling heavily around sunset. The security footage shows nothing unusual until 3:12 a.m. At that point, all cameras simultaneously experience interference static obscuring the images for approximately 5 seconds. When the footage clears, Emma is no longer in her bed. The motion sensors detect movement in the hallway. The camera shows Emma walking slowly toward the stairs, her eyes open but unfocused. Catherine, who had momentarily dozed in the chair beside Emma's bed, remains asleep. Emma descends the stairs, moving with unnatural steadiness for a child navigating in near darkness. James, alerted by the security system's notification on his phone, wakes and reviews the live footage. Seeing Emma heading toward the basement, he rushes from the master bedroom. The hallway camera captures him moving quickly toward the stairs. What happens next must be pieced together from fragmented security footage, audio recordings, and James's subsequent account. Emma reaches the basement door at precisely 3:15 a.m. She opens it without hesitation and descends. James follows approximately 20 seconds later, calling her name. James calls out to Emma, telling her to stop, not to go down there. The basement camera shows Emma moving directly toward the sealed room, the wall of which James had partially dismantled during his earlier investigation. A gap large enough for a child to pass through now exists. Emma approaches this gap. James enters the frame, running toward her. At exactly 3:17 a.m., all recording devices in the house fail simultaneously. The power goes out. For the next 27 minutes, there is no electronic record of what occurred. When the systems reactivate at 3:44 a.m., the basement camera shows James kneeling on the floor, alone, holding Emma's nightgown. Catherine, awakened by the power outage, finds James in the basement. The security footage captures their conversation. Catherine asks what happened and where Emma is. James, distraught, tells her that Emma went through. He tried to stop her, but she wasn't Emma anymore. She looked at him with different eyes. Catherine asks what he's talking about. Went through what? James explains that the wall opened when she sat in the chair and it just took her. He tried to grab her but his hands went right through her, as if she wasn't solid anymore. Physical evidence found in the basement included Emma's nightgown, which laboratory analysis would later show contained unusual mineral deposits matching soil samples from a geological stratum approximately 12 feet below the house's foundation, deeper than the existing basement extended. Most disturbing was what the police found when they fully dismantled the wall to the sealed room. The wooden chair remained, positioned facing the stone wall. On the wall itself, visible only under ultraviolet light, was a perfect silhouette of a small child, arms outstretched, appearing to be partially emerged from the solid stone. The youngest child's final message was found written in crayon on her bedroom wall, hidden behind her dresser. Eliza says I have to help the doctor come back. He's been trying for so long. She says once I help him, I can come home again. I'm scared, but Eliza says it won't hurt. The chair is waiting for me. The ultimate fate of each family member diverged dramatically from this point. Catherine Richardson suffered a complete psychological breakdown after Emma's disappearance. Medical records show she was institutionalized for 6 months following the incident. During her treatment, she repeatedly described seeing Emma standing at the foot of her bed, asking to be brought back through. James Richardson became obsessed with understanding what had happened to his daughter. He abandoned his career, dedicating himself to researching similar historical cases and the theoretical physics of interdimensional travel. He remortgaged their previous home to fund his research, eventually losing it to foreclosure. The 2 older children, Michael and Abigail, refused to discuss the events publicly. Both left for college early through accelerated programs. Abigail changed her name legally upon turning 18. Michael developed an academic interest in theoretical physics, eventually publishing several papers on consciousness and quantum entanglement that obliquely referenced his family's experience. Emma Richardson remains officially classified as a missing person. Despite extensive searches of the property and surrounding areas, no trace of her was ever found beyond the nightgown recovered in the basement. The official investigation concluded with no determination of what occurred. The property at 47 Oakwood Lane remained vacant for 11 months following the Richardson family's departure. It was eventually purchased by a real estate development company that specialized in renovating and flipping historic properties. During the renovation, 2 workers refused to continue after experiencing what they described as a child's voice speaking through the walls. The renovation was completed despite these incidents. The sealed room in the basement was converted into a wine cellar. The wooden chair was removed and destroyed. The new owners, the Mercer family, have reported no unusual experiences since moving in 2 years ago. However, they have never permitted their young daughter to sleep in what was formerly Emma's bedroom, converting it instead into a home office. Physical evidence that exists but defies explanation includes the ultraviolet silhouette on the basement wall, which could not be removed despite multiple attempts. Construction workers eventually covered it with new drywall. Audio recordings from the house contain frequencies that audio engineers cannot attribute to any known source. And most puzzling, Emma's fingerprints, which appeared fresh despite the passage of time, were found in the sealed room during renovation dated well after her disappearance. Catherine Richardson now lives in Arizona under a different name. She has refused all interview requests and maintains no contact with her surviving children. In her only public statement, released through her attorney, she wrote, "Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Some losses cannot be understood through conventional means. I pray no one else experiences what we have." James Richardson continues his research. His current whereabouts are unknown, though occasional academic papers appear under his name. His most recent publication theorized that consciousness might exist independently of physical form, and could potentially transfer between realities under specific conditions. Michael and Abigail Richardson have both established successful careers far from Millbrook. Neither has returned to the town since 2016. When contacted for this documentary, both declined to comment but did not deny the accounts presented. The questions that remain about the Richardson case are numerous. How did Emma possess knowledge of historical events and medical procedures she could not have known? What explains the consistent pattern of similar incidents throughout the house's history? What was the true nature of Dr. Blackwood's threshold therapy? And did he actually discover a method of consciousness transfer across dimensions? Perhaps most disturbing is the pattern that continues to this day. Every 17 years, almost to the day, a family with a child between the ages of 8 and 12 moves into 47 Oakwood Lane. In each case, unusual events are reported. In many cases, the child exhibits behavioral changes. And in some cases, Children have disappeared without explanation. The current owner's daughter will turn 11 next October. After researching this case for months, I still can't explain what happened to Emma Richardson. The evidence suggests possibilities that extend beyond our conventional understanding of reality. If Dr. Blackwood indeed discovered a means of transferring consciousness across dimensional boundaries, what does that imply about the nature of our existence? And if Emma's consciousness was somehow displaced, where or when is she now? Next week, I'll explore another case with surprising connections to the Richardson family and 47 Oakwood Lane. The disappearance of Eliza Blackwood in 1879, Dr. Blackwood's 11-year-old daughter, whose existence was scrubbed from most historical records but whose presence seems to echo through time. If you've experienced something similar or have insights into what might have happened to this family, share in the comments below. Some mysteries need collective wisdom to unravel. Perhaps together, we can find answers that have eluded individuals for generations.